Hello and welcome to season 1 of Playing with Bones, where I am going to try and educate Josh on different parts of history. Every season we look at maybe different time periods or collection of different people. Or
No, I'm genuinely interested because I realised that apparently it's law, right? That the closer you get to 40, the more interested you have to get and the more knowledge you have to know about World War II. So I was watching documentaries about World War II. One in particular was about Hitler's sex life.
Oh, yeah.
Not as saucy as I thought it was going to be, to be fair.
It looked boring.
It was.
Honestly.
I thought it was going to be all beady. He's German. I thought for sure we're getting some shies and stuff. He did like the pee-pee.
Yeah?
Yep. He liked to be peed on. Like to be beat up.
Surprise me.
One girl. No, again, they always preface this in the documentary with, these people didn't particularly like Hitler when they said this thing about him. So
they were just kind of putting on maybe propaganda.
About him, but yeah, it seemed like he was a bit of a womanizer. And that he liked to be peed and beaten up a little bit. And then he'd be pure casual about it afterwards. Like, it's, that was a great evening. Thank you.
I think there was kind of guilt on his part. Oh shit, I'm going to have someone kick the absolute shit out of me tonight after that. I don't
know. See, it's a weird one. Their biggest revelations were that he came from an incestuous background, but the incestuous background was kind of like they came from a very rural area where everybody was technically related to everybody. So they would have ended up marrying second cousins.
It was going to happen either way. Yeah.
But
there's talk there's a tiny bit of Jewish. There was a tiny bit of Jewish in there. Possibly.
They reckon that that's kind of discredited. They said it's unlikely. They said possibly on his father's side there might be. Yeah. But they said from the tests they've ran and all that stuff, it doesn't look like it. Not really. Okay. He used to have some weird kind of old lady thing going on. Not so much that
he liked old women.
There was like rumours he might have been sleeping with these old ladies, like with these old couples.
Yeah.
Where the husband was fine with it, and they were usually rich couples. But people said like that there was like one couple in particular that he was constantly around. They were like grooming him to be like, high level, he was on his way up.
Yeah.
And they were like real high society, like, but that she'd call him her wolf, and she'd be rubbing his head, and his head would be on her like lap and stuff like that. Yeah. But that was apparently like a private nickname for him as well, like was the wolf, and it was something that he used to use as a surname as well, like stuff like that, like wolf would be in his surname, and so that is decoy. And
is that the German for wolf? Wolf?
I don't know, must be. Huh. But again, I wouldn't take this all that seriously. Did point out that an awful lot of women who did go out with him or sleep with him or say any of these things about him ended up dead. I saw that. Died of a terrible dose of suicide usually. Yeah. So they would say. That's what the record books would say. But I kind of ended up there because I ran out of stuff to watch with the Troubles. I got really into Irish history, especially after watching the Kneecap movie.
Oh yeah.
And I really enjoyed that, and I was like, this is going to help promote the Irish language again. But then I started watching stuff about the 1916 Rising, learned a shitload there that I didn't know.
It's very heavy.
Well, the 1960 Rising, yeah, but it's so far away and kind of so.
No, I mean, as it goes on more recent, like it gets heavy.
The Troubles are hard because like a lot of those documentaries I was watching, there was literally people who were in the thick of it.
Yeah.
Ex-IRA fellas, ex-hitmen and all this stuff, and they were talking family about members, it and why they were doing what they were doing, and it's intense. But then you were telling me, because I thought this was kind of isolated to Ireland, maybe Scotland when it came to the Protestant Catholic divide, but this is all over Europe. Yeah, you were telling me about the French.
Well, like you famously like England, but like you the French as well.
Yeah, but the England, it seems like they made a conscious, bar one queen going, nah, we're going to go back to being quite a Catholic. They seem to have made the conscious decision of we are going to be Protestants and this is it. And after Henry, no?
No. So you had Henry. He always saw himself as Catholic. There was no question about
Protestant
it.
To get the divorce,
to a certain extent, but he still would have called himself Catholic. But now he was the head of the Catholic Church in England. So kind of that is what made the Catholic Church. So the Church of England.
He just rebranded it.
Catholic, exactly.
Church of England.
So then after Henry, you went back to you stayed with Protestantism. Then you went Catholicism, back to Protestantism. Then you had James. He went back to Catholicism, and then you had the Stuarts. They kind of flip flopped. Then kind of that time period between Catholicism and being Protestant, and then kind of after Cromwell, they all kind of had to get together and agree that to be King of England from now on, you had to be Church of England. You could not be Catholic. So it's only
that was Protestant then.
That was Protestant. So you're kind of looking from the end of maybe the 17th century onwards.
I couldn't believe it when I realized. I always thought these American religions were like different offshoots of Christianity. I didn't realize they were all Protestants. What I was saying at you last night is like the Catholics are kind of headstrong. They're headstrong in the sense of they've stuck together throughout most of it, but they're soft in the way of we're now losing support, so we are going to change what we believe in to make ye follow us more.
Catholics.
Yeah. Like, I mean, like their stance on sex and divorce and all that has softened because suddenly the collection plates are a little lighter.
Well, yeah.
Whereas with Protestants, it seems like every time somebody had a disagreement, they just started a new church.
Well, yeah, and I would say though with Catholics, I think I said it to you as well when we were talking about it. Like the thing is that like when you look at them in history, like peace would have been signed into law, like everything would have been fine, and the Catholics would get.
Oh yeah.
And then somebody's getting assassinated, and that's when the shit hits the fan.
It
and it's
like that kind of went both ways, even in France. That it was kind of like. Because what I was reading, it was like, the king was trying to make it so that everybody could just live peacefully together. But it was like the one side is like, that's not good enough for us. The other side is not good enough for us. Or we don't trust this side to keep the peace. We don't keep this side, you know. And it was the same up the north where like the Republicans never really trust the loyalists to keep the peace. The loyalists never really trust the Republicans to keep the peace. And then it's just they're waiting for one little slip up and everyone's back to guns blazing, like, you know. And I mean, most ceasefires, that's the way it is, isn't it? You know, they're holding on by a fucking thread, and as soon as anybody slips up for any reason, it's we're back at it.
Yeah.
But
so mid 16th century France would have been kind of similar layout to Ireland at the moment. So kind of like up in kind of the north of France, you had all the Catholics.
Yeah.
And that would include Paris, and then kind of the mid region be kind of neutral, and then under that, then you had the Huguenots, and then.
Did Lutheranism, was that the start of the Protestants?
Yes, basically.
It was a great schism before that. It was just Catholicism before that.
I think there might have been Greek Orthodox then. It was an offshoot. Like it is close, more closely. Very similar, but there was...
like I said, that's more cultural differences than belief differences. Like I am pretty sure an Irish person could go to an Italian or Greek or any Catholic kind of offshoot church and you're going to get basically the same fucking layout, you know? There's going to be a whole lot of difference there. Well, I suppose, which is the same with the Protestants. They have, I don't even know what their differences are that cause them to go Baptist, Methodist, this. I'm
not 100% sure. I know that the big one is that they don't believe in transubstantiation.
Where did Lutheranism start? That wasn't France, and that was Germany.
No, that was Germany. That was Martin Luther. So that was
Luther. I should have fucking known. I mean, like I can't answer my question.
As well, and he, I think it was 50 kind of suggestions for his like reformations to the church. He just walked up to a cathedral one day.
Yeah, he nailed it. Yeah. But with the French then here. Were they we're starting off with the story? Are they starting off Catholic, or are they starting off Protestant, or were they still on the fence?
So if we look at right before where the House of Bourbon started, so they would have been Catholics
all the way up to that point.
Yes, yeah. So they would have been Catholics, and the basically it is really fucking confusing. So Henry IV.
I was looking at their Wikipedia pages last night. These motherfuckers the French get real thick about stuff and they go full on in on it. It's not like they like half-ass anything. They've got like the holy whatever the religious wars, religious war 2, the religious war 3. They'll
be ending the third religious war that we'll be talking about.
And those fucking things didn't happen that far apart from what I could tell.
No, but it's the same with the revolutions. Like they had a few revolutions as well.
As soon as they get upset, it's just like off to war we go.
But the French get shit done. Do you remember the protests
not
last
World War
year?
II, they did not. The documentaries I was watching.
Well. Anyway, so before Henry IV, mind yourself, Josh. Before Henry IV, before Henry IV came to the throne. So Henry III, he was Catholic, and he came from his mom was a Medici.
I saw it. She was the Protestant in this situation. His dad was the Catholic, wasn't it?
Oh, Henry IV. Yes.
Oh, sorry. I'm after jumping one ahead.
You are, yeah.
You have to remember, I'm a crammer when it comes to learning. So I just stuffed all this information into my brain last night. So I got a lot of it, but I got to try and figure out which parts of the stories it goes with. So this is the second guy. We'll talk about him later. Okay.
So Henry III, he's just before like really what this is about. We have to talk about him a tiny bit. So Henry III, his mom was a Medici, and she was staunchly Catholic.
Okay.
She basically had an idea for like a backup, going through all her children of like, right, if this one goes, this is how this one is going to come to the throne. This is how that one is going to come to the throne.
So this is the... I can't even remember anymore. Game of Thrones.
Serpent Queen?
Cersei kind of character.
Yeah, she be a schemer. She was actually...
this son that gets poisoned at the party, and then this one throws itself out the window. I'll marry this one, and then my brother can stop shagging me while I go and do this. She's got all bases covered.
Yeah. So she's on her last kid, basically, on the throne. That's Henry III. And the religious wars are still ongoing. Henry III, eventually, he makes Henry IV, he's not his brother, but he makes him, he's basically his heir.
Yeah.
He makes him his heir because he has married his sister, basically. And in marrying his sister...
He can do it. I thought...
No, he didn't marry the sister, sorry. Henry IV married Henry III's sister.
Okay, because I thought the way I read it was that it was kind of like he had to pass it on to one of his cousins kind of thing because he didn't have a brother or something like that.
That's because he killed his brother the night before he made Henry IV his heir.
Because they were so against making women...
Oh, well, yeah, there's no Salic law in France. You cannot pass it on.
Because they were saying that there were like a lot of problems would have been solved in France religiously if they had just left one, the women take over, because they could have continued on the line rather than having to pass it off to like a distant relative who might be a completely different religion and have different views completely coming in. And well, fair play to them. Even when they didn't want to do it, they passed it fucking off to the people they didn't want to give it to.
So before Henry IV, the future Henry IV, Henry, who would have been Henry II of Navarre at this stage, he would have inherited the kingdom of Navarre from his dad.
That got confusing too, to be fair. Because I turned to you and you were like, "Are you sure it's Henry III?" And so there's like a big gap between 3 and 13 here. And I don't know where the rest of them go. They must have had a bad feeling. Why do people keep dating this first name? And you're like, they're the same person. It's okay.
Just different countries. So he married Margaret of Valois on 18th of August 1572. So the big thing there was to try and unite the Calvinists or the Huguenots and they
sound like a fun bunch.
Yeah, and
are they like
the
kind
Catholics.
of Puritan kind of style people, like real strict, harsh kind of?
They'd have been a bit looser. Do you know what? A tiny bit looser.
The feeling I got off them was it was kind of like, you need to be stricter kind of thing.
They weren't as bad as the Cromwellian Protestants. Do you know, like the Protestants, they would have been the Puritans, no dancing, no singing, they would have been hardcore. This lot, they wouldn't have been as bad. I mean, like, pretty
much just believe that you are just here to suffer on earth. To get your spot in heaven.
But if you take into account with the Huguenots that Henry IV was like their leader and he had about 18 mistresses in his... No, sorry, that was Louis. They had a lot of mistresses, not 18. That's Louis XIV, but we get to him later. He was known for being...
That's fun and all, but when you named these guys to me first time, you called them the Huguenots, and I was looking forward to some space age traveling here.
Sorry, the Huguenots.
Nope.
So yeah,
these born ass fellas stayed right on earth, doing nothing. Bitching and moaning.
So this marriage was meant to help kind of calm...
Bridge the gap.
Yeah, exactly. But what it had done was kind of, it brought an influx of Protestants into Paris to obviously celebrate Henry's marriage.
Oh, is this the massacre?
It is.
Why do we keep naming massacre or the saints after, or massacres after saints? I suppose it happens on the day, St. Valentine's Day massacre. But
so the Catholics were all fine after there was the Peace of Saint-Germain-en-Laye. That was kind of what started the end of the religious wars before this wedding, and that happened in 1570. And the Catholics were fine. They were like, okay, great. We're fine. Everybody's kind of at peace. But then when all the Protestants start coming into Paris 2 years later, they're like, right, we're fine. We're not supposed to fight them, but why the fuck are they in our city, kind of thing.
See, this is it sounds exactly like North of Ireland stuff.
Exactly.
But kind of opposite way around, where the Protestants are like, the fuck these Catholics think they're doing. There's a ceasefire. We're kind of at peace, but don't be coming over to my side of the city.
Exactly. You know? So tensions, understandably, like we've seen in the north, like you said, tensions would have been absolutely, like they'd have been really high as it was. And there was this. I
suppose the Catholics then would have the feeling of these fuckers are rubbing it in our face, no?
Yeah. A bit.
You're in our city rubbing it in our fucking face after we were good enough to let you fucking off with
and
this. And
he is getting married to the king's sister. Do you know, it kind of makes it worse again.
We did you this favour and you're here rubbing it in my fucking face. No, fuck these guys.
Yeah. And then there was also an admiral called Admiral Gaspard de Coligny. There was an assassination attempt on him on the 22nd of August 1572. So that was 4 nights after the marriage.
Is this the guy? No, I might be wrong. Who got stabbed in their carriage? It was like a drive-by.
This is Henry IV. Henry IV got stabbed in the carriage, but we'll get to that soon.
Okay,
at the end of his life.
How did they try and assassinate this guy? Because they don't like whenever I hear assassinate, I just think someone with a gun. So I was surprised at the stabbing, but with this one, what was it?
Yeah, so it was a failed assassination attempt. Failed in that it didn't go right the first time. I'm not too sure what the mechanics of it were the first time, but everybody was like, oh shit, now we're going to be found out. Like, do you know, we can't be, and they were Catholic. I think it was organised by the Duke de Guise. So he'd be involved in the War of the Three Henrys as well, that we'll talk about in a few minutes.
So it's kind of like that moment in the new Gladiator. When we won't say too much.
We won't say too much spoilers.
But when a certain actor screws him over a little bit.
Yeah.
Or like in 300 when they
So to cover their tracks, they say, right, well now we have to order a full just wipe out of Protestants so that we can get him assassinated and nobody find out that it's us. So it didn't just happen in Paris. Like this was like in a lot of cities. One person knows
now everybody's got to go.
Everybody's got to go. And I mean like it was bad. People, the houses were predetermined. The houses were marked the night before. Then they went into the houses, Catholic mob went in, they dragged people out.
Yeah, it's a real common practice up the north as well. But it was again the other way around. It was like, there was one story, it was horrific. It was like this family that had absolutely nothing to do with republicanism. It was just that they were Catholic. Yeah. And the house had been marked for over a year. They knew they were going to knock these people off. And they went in and shot like 2 fucking young, 18, 20-year-old because they were just young Catholic boys inside in the house.
Yeah.
And your man said, he was like, if it was a party and we came, because the party had just finished, the little birthday party, and there was other guys, their friends were in there with them, we would have shot them too. We don't have time to ask names. You know, we would have shot the father, we would have shot the other brother if he had been there. It's crazy. So they do like the mark places, and they're so obviously then they can't really say that they had any idea of peace in their head here. It was they'd always kind of.
Well, I think that when we've seen
it to fall off, you're kind of you were ready for it to fail.
You were ready for it to fail, but when you have like very influential noblemen like the Duke de Guise and people coming, do you know, like he was. It was a faction.
Was just a big issue back then because they had no TV or movies or anything.
But also religion. I mean, religion was a very easy motivator, and like things got so bad during the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre that like people were like literally they were stripped, they were thrown into the river down the Seine, they were washed down the Seine. But if they weren't dying fast enough, they were plucked out like with a spear. They were taken out and they were stabbed with a spear and they were like thrown back into the river. Like, so they were watched to make sure that they died like they were on the way down to the river. And if it wasn't fast enough, they were getting the spear. Like,
this is still common. Oh no, that's not
common practice.
But there's still hundreds of people. I mean, like hundreds of thousands of people dying per day because of religion. On having slightly different beliefs from the other person.
Definitely. So Henry survived the Bartholomew's Day massacre basically by saying that he would convert to Protestantism. What happened was he was brought into King Henry III. Himself and his companions were told that Henry III wanted to see him. So
I was confused about this section.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell, was he still king through it all or what? Like
Henry III was king. Henry IV hadn't come to the throne yet.
It sounded like he was, after the St. Bartholomew's Day thing, he had to go missing, like on the run a bit.
It was the opposite. He couldn't really leave court. He had to play the good boy. Like, so he said that he converted to Catholicism, but that was under like major duress. So him and the Duke d'Orléans
So
his companions.
You're an alive Catholic or a dead Protestant, you make your mind up.
Basically, they were called to Henry III's bedchamber. They were told that their companions had to wait outside. Henry III brought him in. He said, right, well, you're going to be Catholics or else you're going to die like your companions outside. And apparently they had to hear like the shouts and screams as like the guards came and they killed them. And now also at the same time, Henry being the King of Navarre, he would have had, you know, the way you'd see the Swiss Guard with the Pope. Yeah. They were like, not mercenaries, but they were like, every kind of king would have had some Swiss guards. Like they were always on loan. He would have had Swiss guards with him in France as part of his retinue. They were all slaughtered as well, apparently really easily. So it was, you know, he had to be a good boy. So all this time while he's kind of like playing, like I said, a good boy, he's fallen out of love with the wife. I don't think they don't have a child. I'm not too sure if they ever even consummated that they were able to get the marriage annulled. But he's kind of spending his time in court before Henry III dies, just sleeping with everybody. He's no, that is how he spends his time. I mean, if he's keeping himself out of trouble, and it works because Henry III. So
at this point, he's just the next in line, and these people outside know he's the next in line, or a bit pissy.
No, he's not the next in line yet. Okay. So the next in line after this would be the Duke d'Orléans. Henry, he fell out with Henry III. And there is the Cardinal of Lorraine as well, who would have been Henry III's brother. Okay.
So what would the other fella be to him? The first guy?
He would have been a cousin, as far as I'm aware, because obviously the Cardinal couldn't ascend to the throne. Because, so he called them in as well another night because they were basically plotting against him. And he had the two of them killed. Now he's after killing his brother and he's after killing a prince of the church. So the Pope gets really shitty. And then the Pope getting shitty incites more Catholics. And they have... in the
meantime, the fucking Protestants and the Huguenots
are probably jumping for joy.
But they're pissed off with him as well at this point because he's after, in their eyes, he abandoned them to become a Catholic, didn't he?
No, they were still talking about Henry III here.
No, but I know, but I mean, sorry.
Yeah. We're still on Henry III.
I thought you said he had to convert.
Henry IV did. To stay at court.
These guys, why couldn't they just have different names? Why do they all
That's why I keep saying Henry of Navarre, and then you know I keep trying to tell you of Navarre. I keep making that distinction. Okay. I'll just keep saying of Navarre until he gets there. Okay. So where was I?
So Henry of Navarre is the one waiting to become.
He's the one waiting to become king.
Right.
Okay, so Henry III has pissed off. No, we're starting before he becomes king. The lead up to him becoming king.
I get it.
So Henry III then.
See, I'm wrong with this podcast. I'm confusing the
a lot of Pope. I'm going to do you a family tree the next time. Big family tree. That's what I'll do. No, yeah, okay. No, I'll have a print up.
Great, now I got homework.
So he has pissed off the Pope and obviously all the rest of the Catholics. And Catholics like to make mad assassination attempts and plots.
Why are the Catholics pissed off with him?
Because he just killed a cardinal. And the Pope,
sorry. I was still stuck on the VAR guy.
And as soon as the Pope says that's a bad person, he's a bad person in all Catholic eyes. Then a monk is involved in an assassination attempt.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Fuck me, the monks were fucking running around killing people.
He comes to court and he has letters, and he says to the guard basically, I have messages for the king, and of course he's a monk. Like, you're not going to bat an eyelid, really. So he's allowed in, but he's not left up to the throne completely yet. And he's like, I have messages for you, but I also have a secret message.
Don't tell me Game of Thrones isn't 90% based on France.
No. There's a lot of difference in Game of Thrones, different ones. But and Henry III is like, right, everybody step back so you can come up and talk to me in private. So the monk goes up, but I don't understand why he stabs him here, because he stabs him in the tummy. Kind of
is right in front of everyone. I'm going to die directly after I do this.
But he doesn't even get the job done properly. He stabs Henry in the tummy, so Henry doesn't die for another 24 hours. The monk is killed straight away. And then this time, Henry has had time to tell Henry of Navarre, you are my heir. And then...
Should have went for the jugular.
So then that's how Henry got to Henry IV, Henry of Navarre. There's no more confusion now because Henry III is dead. He is on the throne.
And this guy doesn't seem that bad, to be fair. This is the guy who was literally trying his best to just make everybody kind of live in harmony, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like...
I think one guy, he favoured one over the other, but it was kind of a job of, look, if we can all just be cool, we'll be cool, yeah?
Exactly. Now he said he would convert to Catholicism, but that was a stipulation of him being named heir as well. You will convert to Catholicism, and then he was like, yeah, okay, cool.
Because he wasn't excommunicated, was he?
No. Henry III might have been before his death because he killed a cardinal. I should look into that one. Okay. But I mean, like Henry IV, he introduced. He
was the one that was excommunicated and being brought back in, wasn't he? One of them was definitely excommunicated and then he was recommunicated. I don't know.
Recommunicated. I think that might have happened Louis XIV as well.
Whatever about excommunication, saying you're going to recommunicate someone suddenly makes that Christian shit sound a whole lot more culty, doesn't it?
Unexcommunicate.
I am going to recommunicate you with the Lord.
I mean, like the big thing about Henry IV, he's like, he made real efforts to stabilize France. He was like, there was a lot of reforms, economic improvements, and like you said, it's efforts to establish religious tolerance. So the Edict of Nantes,
Clinton in the north.
Exactly. So this was one of Henry's most important achievements, and it was granted substantial rights to the Huguenots. It ended the war of religions permanently by allowing Protestants to practice their religion freely in certain areas. So like they'd have certain villages, certain places where they could be open and practicing like and nobody could say a word to them. But they would also ensure then that the Catholics would remain the dominant religion.
So it'd be like a Gaeltacht for Protestants.
I suppose it's a good way of looking at it, or a reservation. It's just a terrible way of looking at it. Like, well, you know what I mean? Basically,
your law only applies in these boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
Step out of these boundaries. Well,
your law only applies in these boundaries, but if you piss off the crown, like, you know, it's.
And it's still, obviously, at that point, there's probably still dangerous for one religion to one Catholic to go into a Protestant zone or a Protestant to go into a Catholic zone, even though they're zoned off.
Exactly.
They're zoned off because they can't stand to be that close to each other. It's bizarre because there ain't that much difference between the two religions. I'll tell you that much now. You're mostly the same prayers. The only difference, there isn't that much of a fucking difference. And to hate each other so much over religion sounds so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Now, I realise when you're talking about up north, Catholic and Protestant is really just code for Irish and English. Do you know?
Yeah.
The religion really is just kind of standing in the way of straight out international fucking hatred of each other.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas France, I'm not really 100% sure how it works there. This is just basic religion, isn't it? It is a religious war over there. It's not really about territory.
It's religious war. I mean...
It doesn't feel like it's about territory. I mean, France is France, like, you know.
But you've seen now France is like different in territory, Spain, which I actually was something that I was going to say to you, because going on in the episodes through the series season, it's going to be important to kind of understand that at this moment in time in France, so your government was split up into 13 parlements, they were called. So it was all kind of like, for all intents and purposes, it's kind of like the system that they have in America. But then
where the states have their own laws and their own governing body, and then there's a bigger governing body like a representative from each parliament then goes to the bigger governing body for the bigger issues.
But then you had like 3 estates. So every parliament had its 3 estates. So you had the kind of the nobility, you had the bourgeois, which is kind of the working class, and then you had kind of like lower than working class. The most important the most important parliament then was Paris, was the district that contained Paris. And then the thing was with France as well is the tax system was all over the place, which we will talk about how they reformed then maybe in episode 3. But it was expected as the king. You are king of France, but you might only be like de jure entitled to say like 3 counties in France.
What does that mean?
So you had rights to these these were your lands. These 3 counties, as an example, were your lands as king. All these lands then around you, all this is France, and these are your subjects. You run it, but you own these 3 counties. So it was expected. So basically,
then, like, this land is what entitles you to have any right to be king at all. Like, you have to own. You have to own a plot of land to be in the running to be king, and then the rest is just...
Well, it's not even that you need to own a plot of land. It's more of like how you make your money. So as king, because you own these 3 counties, this is where you get your tax from. You shouldn't be getting tax sent from all these other counties.
Oh, right. So they don't get like international, or they don't get national tax. They just get local
right
tax.
Now. Yeah. So like you as king, you did want to own areas like Ile de France and like
so Vikings, and again Game of Thrones. I know it's fictional, but they do kind of base their time period on this time period or medieval time. But like where you go to your lord, you pay your tax, and then they kind of like the
feudal system,
kind of like the mafia system a little bit. The money kind of goes up, but
it was kind of like, so I like the feudal system was good in that, like when it worked. It did work, but there was a lot of like this is like the age of chivalry. Like this is when it worked. So as in like you were the lord, you looked after like everybody. Like you looked after your whole community, and you were supposed to treat them well. You were supposed to look after them. They paid you tax. They paid you stuff.
And then you kick that up to the next guy, and he kicks that up to the next guy.
And
eventually kicks it into a state fund.
It should work, but men are greedy. That's the bottom line. It's the mafia system.
Except that the Godfather is the country.
Yeah.
So he's getting the last biggest cut of the money at the top, and then everybody else takes a cut along the way, but they also have to use their cut to pay their guys who are taking care of
pyramid
this
scheme.
Essentially, yeah.
Basically.
But that's kind of what it is now as well.
Yeah. So, actually, and then kind of as the series goes on, then that's kind of like a big thing coming into Louis XIV, the kind of how he came to be an absolute monarch, and how he kind of doubled by basically into the millions of how much tax he was collecting, because everywhere got taxed. But we'll go into that.
Running out of money, weren't they?
That's because they were running out of money from the American Civil War. We'll go into that though. So I mean, Henry then, his personal life, I said that he was kind of having fun all around the court while he was being quiet, but he had 2 marriages. His first one with Margaret de Valois, Queen of Navarre, that was dissolved in 1572. It was only politically arranged. Then he married Marie de Medici. He had Louis XIII, who would come to him afterwards.
And as soon as he in all of that marriage, he went right back to being a Protestant, didn't he?
Basically.
He was like, well, I'm a Huguenot again.
Yeah. He would kind of flip-flop and kind of I'd say it would depend who was standing in the room on a certain day, he seems like. I mean, I don't think he had much religious scruples, Henry IV. For a man of that time period, it was surprisingly...
Whoever was going to support me, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's how he got the House of Bourbon onto the throne. But he had a lot of illegitimate children, and he made poor Marie de Medici look after all the illegitimate children, raise them along with their own children.
See, you say that
no, these were after the marriage. It wasn't. I'm bringing these illegitimate into the marriage.
They already. I mean, not to fucking be positive about it. It's not like that was uncommon at the time.
That is uncommon at the time. It's okay to have a mistress.
I get that.
It's the children's part that I'm saying that's not okay.
But the fact but what I'm saying is,
would nearly be pissed off.
He bought the kids into take it. He didn't just abandon them because they were half breed.
Yeah, and which would have pissed off a lot of the French nobility and the French peasants.
I'm just saying by modern standards.
I know, but then when you look at it as well,
anyway.
But when you look at it as well, Louis XVI, that we will talk about at the very end of the season, did not take mistresses. He didn't take mistresses, and that's what turned some public opinion against him, was because the man only wanted to be with his wife sometimes. He didn't even really want to be with her at the time. Even though they had a great relationship later on, maybe he was asexual, maybe he was homosexual, but because he didn't have mistresses, people were like, what the fuck is wrong with this
thought homosexuality was cool in France. They're not the ones running around in makeup with big floppy hair and
it doesn't mean they were homosexual.
Flamboyant clothes. And
interestingly, Henry IV's heir, his son Louis XIII, there is some. It's not proven, but there is some kind of talk that he may have been homosexual also.
Yeah, I just thought it was a pretty normal, cool thing there. It was just something they did, kind of like.
I'm Philippe I, Duc d'Orléans. He would have been Louis XIV's brother. He was brought up basically dressed as a girl his whole life, because not so he wouldn't outshine the brother. But he was probably gay as well. It was a well kept secret, but because everybody in the French court was
if
very
they're religious, if they're Catholic or Protestant, then there wouldn't have been down for any of that. So it wouldn't. I am kind of like. I'm just saying, I thought they did. I thought that was always just kind of a stereotype of them. Maybe it's just the way they dressed that kind of put me off a bit. That made me think that they were kind of.
Well, I'm not saying they were against it.
Openly sexual. Yeah, but if they're Catholic and Protestant and they're hardcore Catholic and Protestant, they're fighting over being Catholic and Protestant, would that not be a sticking point straight off the point?
James I and IV of England was a Catholic, and he was most likely, I mean, like, there is like written testimony, like, you know, I mean,
so what you're saying is basically a lot of these people weren't religious at all, they were just political.
A lot of these people were religious to a certain extent through their lifetime, and then again, we're going to talk, see it with a few kings here, like they would live a life of like sin and gluttony by those kind of standards. And then maybe the last 24 hours, they will call their confessor. Exactly. So, I mean, like, you're looking at dealing with a lot of this as well, where it is a religion where you can recant and on your deathbed, and it's like, cool, no problem.
It's not. This is where people make a mistake. And I'm, again, completely anti-Christian, but that is not the way it works.
I know.
You have to be in your soul. You're not like, you can't lie to your God about how you're feeling.
I know, it's still like the whole, like,
in your
balance.
Soul, you know? It has to be a real regret.
But on your deathbed, if you think about it, you mightn't really, what you are feeling mightn't be real regret. But while you are lying there in your deathbed, that feeling that you have, you might well interpret it to be regret, to really believe that this fear that's on you, it is regret. It is that, oh shit, I'm not going. Matter. I know. But
not to
the person God. That's lying there in their deathbed that can't distinguish between that emotion, but that doesn't matter.
The plan was always to wait till the last minute to say sorry, then no matter what way you're feeling, you could even be nearly, well, no, you could be if you were genuine sorry for it. I'm sure if there's an all-powerful God in their religion, if their religion is right, then yeah, he would take notice that, yeah, this person is genuinely remorseful. But it's just, I hate that fucking perception of you can just say sorry at the last minute. You can't just say sorry at the last minute. You got to feel the sorry to make it work.
I would also say again, without saying too much, because it's for next week's episode, Louis XIV was seen as the sun god. And actually, do you know what? We're going into Louis XIII, so I can actually say it here to you now. Louis XIII and his wife did not have children for 23 years. They had 4 stillbirths in those 23 years and a lot of miscarriages. Next thing, Louis XIII comes along. After 23 years, it's so out of the blue that there was talks that Louis XIII didn't even think that Louis XIV was his son. Do you know? Now, DNA testing has been done since, and it's been proven that he's definitely Louis XIII's son.
There's a lot of Louis XIII. Sorry, I think we might have missed the 14th in the between there somewhere.
Okay, so I got
Louis
excited.
Louis XIII him and his wife had lots of miscarriages, lots of stillbirths, having no luck having a child. And then eventually when Louis XIV comes along, he believes that possibly the wife's cheating on him. Because
there was some talk of it. No, yeah, it's not a big thing. It's where Alexander Dumas got the idea for the man in the iron mask. Yeah, like,
I
things
get
like
it.
That.
I mean, if you've got like 20 fails and suddenly one pops out, you're kind of like...
But once kind of they got their head around it from a very young age, because of how long it took to get him, it was instilled in him.
Been praying that child had some distinguishing features within the first couple of years.
But that's it. But it was instilled in Louis XIV from a very young age that his birth was a miracle, that he was God-given, that he was ordained by God. Yeah. His epithet, I can never say that, is the sun god, the sun king, the sun god. No, it's not. So, I mean, like, you cannot blame this man for thinking, I can go. This is the man with 18 mistresses. You cannot blame him for thinking, I can go and do this all throughout my life. And now in these few last minutes, I can apologize and that will be okay because technically I am God.
I don't need to apologize at all. I can do what I want.
Exactly.
So, Louis XIII then was the one that didn't do a whole pile. He was just pretty regular, was he? He just got on with things, had a few back and forth with the Protestants and Catholics.
Yeah, I mean, like, he's relatively quiet.
He was just kind of balancing it off.
Yeah. He was born in, just a tiny bit of background. He was born in the Palace of Fontainebleau in 1601. His mom was Marie de Medici, and she was actually Italian. She was from a famous the Medici family.
She's the one that was super hardcore Protestant, yeah? And the father was Catholic.
No,
or is that
that's Henry IV's parents. We're going back a generation. So Henry IV's mother was hardcore Protestant. His dad was a Catholic. At one stage, Henry IV was brought to French court by his mother, who was a hardcore Protestant. Then there was pressure put on her to change to a Catholic, and she said no. They said, get out of court, but you got to leave Henry here. So Henry was brought up to court. Right. Sorry, I skipped over that part. I'm sorry. So but these...
The Louis.
The Louis are all Catholic.
Okay.
So Louis, when they had Louis XIV, a few years later, they had one more child, Philippe I. Philippe I was basically dressed. You should look him up. Dressed as a girl for a long, long time. There's stories that go around that basically himself, Philippe and Louis, got into a fight one evening. You know how it is with brothers, probably about 7, 8, 9 that way. And Louis swings and kicks Philippe. They're eating porridge or something like that, and they get into a fight. They're on the floor rolling around. There's porridge on the two of them. And next thing, Louis starts peeing on Philippe, and Philippe's like, "Fuck this, like
freaking out." Yeah,
he's backing him. And Philippe gets dragged off him and scolded and a bit of a beating for he peed on his brother. His brother peed on him first, but he peed on the king. He peed on the future king. Like,
well, that's the way.
Well, no, he peed on the king. At this stage, Louis would have been king. Sorry, because he was only a small child coming.
Oh, that's right, because his mother was regent for ages, wasn't she? Like 19 years or something like that.
Yeah.
No, was it 19 years? Am I right? 14 years.
14 years,
14,
yeah.
That makes more sense. 19, he'd have been a fucking full-grown adult. There'd be no reason for him to be in that place.
Well, yeah, exactly. And interestingly, his dad, Louis XIII, he actually came to the throne under the regency as well. So his mom would have been a regency. Louis XIII. Louis XIII died.
He was the one that was assassinated, no?
No. Henry IV was assassinated.
Oh, my fucking God. When is Henry IV? He's the first one we talked about.
Henry III was the first one we talked about. He was assassinated by the priest. Henry IV, then, we had actually mentioned his assassination a bit earlier because you'd asked me about him.
In the carriage. He was in a carriage. They stabbed him. He survived for a little while, but then died after, yeah?
Yes. Okay, so basically, they were stopped in traffic.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's because we just mentioned it.
There was I remember this. There was a coronation of a queen got up ahead, wasn't there? And it was there was a big congestion in traffic that day, apparently, which I found funny considering the time period.
Right, but if you think of Game of Thrones show, and there was congestion there as well.
Yeah. And then he got stabbed inside in the carriage, but managed to survive for a while. And
yeah,
and
exactly.
They caught that guy too and killed him, didn't they?
They did.
Pretty sure. Yeah.
Oh. They caught him, and boy, did they kill him. So basically, they tortured him out in the open. And then, do you remember what I was? I explained to you like how the wheel was used, breaking on the wheel. But every country used the wheel differently. So, like in Austria, they'd like wrap your limbs around it and then break
this guy, didn't they? Is this the guy that was the Great? Yeah.
Oh, Henry the Good, Henry the Great, Henry Le Bon Roy is what they used to call him, like the good king.
So, it would have been pissy if he was killed, murdered, especially in public.
Exactly. So what they did was they tortured your man. Then they kind of tied him to this wheel. So he was, I don't want to step too far away from the microphone, but he was like flat. And then they got a horse and they tied it to each limb. And then they were going to make the horses go and run off, but it wasn't quite working out properly. So they got a guy to come in and kind of like hack a tiny bit from under each kind of joint while your man was still alive. Like the next thing, and then they were like, go for it. And like they ran and whew. Yeah.
See, that's what Donald Trump thought would happen when he set up his fake assassination all those months ago. Like, that's what happened.
Nah.
Nope.
So Louis XIII.
After him, then Louis takes over. Louis has a pretty regular.
He does. Existence. I mean, he has a regency. The younger brother, there's kind of interesting there, a tiny bit. He's kind of, there's conspiracies against his mother when she's regent by Louis XIII's kind of older brother. So Louis XIV, the king that's there, his uncle was conspiring against the mother. Like,
was he killed or banished? Did he not get banished?
He was banished.
Banished, wasn't it?
Banished. Gaston of Orleans was banished, as far as I remember. Yes, yeah.
So what age would he have taken power then off his mom? Would it have been about 14, 15?
He would have been about
a normal
13.
Age?
No, 13 was majority age for a king.
Can you imagine a 13-year-old with that kind of power? Mm-hmm. Hormones just kicking off.
That's what, though, if you look at a lot of the young courts, the royalty that's like Henry VIII, Louis XIV, when they started young, Louis XV, he was 5, I think.
What?
Yeah, now regency, obviously, again. But they're so you can really tell that they would have been a young court. I mean, like, do you know, like the intrigue,
but that's everyone what going fucking batshit crazy like 6 in the morning.
Compared to like when you see someone coming to the throne,
bring me the royal MDMA,
and there's not the same excess. But when a king or like the ruling couple have been in power for since they were young, like it's just gluttonous. Like it really, really is like excess to the extreme. Like. Worse than fucking Elvis.
The longer you're, just you don't know any different at that stage.
Yeah.
You know, this is just what you're used to. People are constantly supplying you with booze and food and parties, and especially then if they don't have a very controversial reign, like if they're not getting into battles and stuff like that, then what else are they going to be fucking doing, really?
Yeah.
You know, they have councils to take care of stuff.
Exactly.
Their job really is just to be there for, you know.
Yeah. Take over. Said. Yeah, exactly. But in 1627, then the Huguenots kind of fuck things up a tiny bit for themselves. And so they have up to now, under Louis XIII and his father, since the Edict of Nantes, enjoyed a certain degree of freedom and, like we said, to a certain degree. Yeah. But then they decided to rebel against royal authority. And that led to the
When you
siege
say
of
to a certain degree, are we talking African Americans when they got their first civil rights, or after to that degree, are they still
Huguenots,
more or less?
More. Huguenots, they could hold they could be judges, they could hold land, they could hold court positions, they could be nobles, you know.
So there wasn't really a whole pile, and if they kept their mouth shut about what religion they were, but they looked the same as the other religion anyway.
Exactly. What really gets them into trouble again later in the season is pushing it in the king's face.
Yeah.
That's really what kind of where they should really now they have to kind of putting their foot in it again with the siege of
always putting their foot in it, huh?
But it was La Rochelle, it was a big port city, so it would have been a strategic place for the French, and they laid siege to it. It resulted the Royal Army won, and it ended the military resistance of the Huguenots. But then it ended up with the Edict of Allies being introduced in 1621, which it allowed the Huguenots to retain their religious freedoms, but it stripped them of their military and political privileges.
So all those judges and lawyers and all their basically it's get back down to working class.
Yeah, you can still live at court. You like there was still place for Protestants at court.
Yeah, but you're the clown.
No, it wasn't quite that bad. But it also, I mean, like
places in court: clown, servant, cook, clean.
Basically. And now the monarchy is kind of, after the Edict of Allies, it's on its way to absolute monarchism, which is
which is the difference between I own these 3 counties, I actually own France.
It's the difference between Henry VIII being able to kill a load of his wives and Henry VIII being like, oh shit, I'm stuck with this one.
But again, you're not serving the country's serving you.
The country is serving you. What you say is law. Yeah. You have advisors. Your advisors can tell you this. Your advisors can tell you that. But if you go against your advisors, well, it's tough shit. They have to sign this into law. This is what's happening. Yeah. There can be rebellions and all that jazz.
Man in the WWE.
Yeah.
His word is last, and it doesn't matter what dirty shit he's doing behind the scenes. You've got to keep your mouth shut and say, yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Or he'll go, you're fired. But in French terms, that's your head's going to be chopped off.
Yep. Now, in this space of time also, it's important to say that France was also involved in the 30 Years' War. So it was a big kind of a European kind of affair war. It was a conflict between the Catholic and Protestant states in Europe.
Fuck me.
On the wider scale. So he allied himself with the Protestant forces to weaken the power of Habsburgs, who ruled Spain and the Holy Roman Empire. So Louis, while being Catholic, he would have sided with the Protestants because he would have had his eye on Spain.
Right.
His dad would have, like I said, he was King of Navarre. Louis would have inherited that as well. So that was in Spain. So
on the border kind of thing.
Yeah, now it's in Spain. If you look at that block, it's Spain. But they would have been starting to come into the time as well where they wanted to expand France. And kind of naturally, if you own Navarre, you're going to want to take all of Spain as well. So you're not going to want Spain to do good. So aligning with yourself with the Protestants doesn't seem like the worst idea.
Again, TV has saved us so much hassle. Countries don't worry about it. With the exception of like the likes of Russia, there's no other country looking to expand the border. Russia and those fucking Israeli people. Those angry fucking crazy Israeli people. Because apparently we're anti-Semitic now.
Say that again?
The Irish are anti-Semitic now.
We're not anti-Semitic. We are I'm sorry. I do not like Simon Harris. There's just something about him that I do not like. I don't think he's my Taoiseach. But what he said about that we're not anti-Semitic. We're anti-child murder. We're anti-genocide. Fuck off.
And that is essentially, they're like the only two conflicts I can think of right now that's about land. And that's, well, they will claim it's not about land, but it's about fucking land. Mm-hmm. Well, it is about land because they want their own nation. And then you have the Russians after the Ukrainians for their land. But,
it's just like the French are after the Spanish.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it's just so uncommon for Europeans these days because that doesn't happen anymore. We're just kind of, so obviously European economy, it's almost like European Union has made one kind of whole country out of Europe. Yeah. You know, in that sense. Yeah. Which is a positive thing. No, not just here. No, we never tried it. We're on our own little island over here, happy as shit. To a degree, until people come over here trying to take our spots.
But maybe that's what France is trying to do, like maybe kind of like on a wider scale, trying to make it peaceful for everybody by taking everybody else's land. But they didn't do it as good as the Brits. Anyway. So aligning themselves with the Protestants, they were coming against the Habsburgs. So do you remember I was explaining to you about Philip II?
Sorry, I just had a side note before you get into it. How much did it piss off the English that they were able to have India, Africa, Canada, Australia, and this little pissant of a fucking country next door kicked up so fucking much. They won World War II, but they couldn't quieten us down. You know, must have been a fucking real. Every time they went off to war, we were there attacking them again. From one side.
It reminds me of The Evil Dead. Do you know what ads is in the windmill? And they have like, he has like the tiny little ads coming up to Ash, sorry. Do you know, like in The Evil Dead? That's what it always reminds me of, is that big Ash is Britain, but he's so fucking annoyed and pissed off with all the tiny little Ashes coming. They're relentless. They just keep going and going and going. That's what I was like.
Most of the world and you couldn't tame us. You had to compromise with us as best you could. Anyway, sorry, you were talking about the
Habsburgs. Do you remember I told you about King Philip of
the Habsburgs sound like a family that are in White Chicks in the Hamptons.
Quite possibly. Do you remember I explained about the Habsburg Jaw?
You said something about it.
Philip II, he was extremely inbred. Yeah. No, underbites. This is a guy that when they opened up his head, it was mush. It was
from being inbred.
He didn't have any heir. His heir would have been his sister, and the Spanish could inherit. If women could inherit, and his sister would eventually go on to marry Louis XIV. But that ends that kind of helps to end that conflict. But by going back to what I said, I'll say it again, by aligning himself with the Protestants, he was coming up against the Habsburgs and the Holy Roman Emperor. So by kind of coming up against them with quite a big force, even though he was with the Protestants, he was making himself a huge Catholic threat, like, you know, like not a threat to Catholicism, but like a huge Catholic power in Europe, like coming up against like the Holy Roman Empire.
But I thought the Holy Roman Empire would be Catholic. No?
Yes.
You mean so then why would he be a big threat against other Catholics?
No. I didn't say. That's what I said. He wasn't. That he himself is a Catholic threat. Like he's a Catholic power.
Oh, you mean he is a power? Sorry, yeah. I took it as in you were saying
I worded it wrong.
That the Romans were worried about this guy and that he was going to be this big Catholic threat against these other Catholics. But what you're actually saying is because of the amount of power, he is this Catholic who threatens a lot of people with power. Yeah. He was huge. That's what I'm saying. He still retained his Catholic identity even though he was with Protestants. Okay, right. So he had Protestants and Catholics working together to he basically was supporting the Protestants that wanted to take down the Habsburgs. Okay, so it's kind of like my theory about when aliens come to this world, suddenly racism between humans will stop because we'll have something else to hate. Once we have something mutually different not to dislike, we'll all start looking at that. So instead of disliking each other as Catholics and Protestants, it's like, well, no, we dislike this lad over here. We need to take that territory. That's ours. So we'll work together. Common enemy and my enemy is my friend kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly it. So, I mean, this goes on. That does go on a tiny bit into Louis XIV's reign. Louis XIII, he died at the age of 41. We reckon he caught TB. It would have been common enough at the time. So he died on 14th of May, 1643. So he was sick for quite a few months. He basically in the spring of 1643, he kind of knew that his time was coming to an end. And he decided to put his affairs in order for his 4-year-old son, Louis XIV. Imagine 4. He didn't trust the judgment of Queen Anne, who would normally have been the sole regent of France. And it's not that...
That's his wife, eh?
Yeah. Okay. That was his wife. It's not that he thought that she'd betrayed Louis. She would never, ever have betrayed Louis XIV, the son. She would never have done that. I mean, like...
Or possibly maybe push him in the wrong direction.
Yeah, basically. Louis and Anne, Louis the son, Louis XIV, and Anne, the mother, had an uncommonly close relationship. And again, it's because of how hard they tried for the baby.
That's crazy. Because, I was saying about the Nazis and the Hitler stuff that I was watching, the exact same thing with his mother. She had a shitload of stillborn and miscarriages. And when Hitler was born, now he's got a shitload of step brothers and sisters. His dad was a bit of a womanizer. But she was absolutely fucking like, she was hooked to him because of the fact that they had so much trouble having a child. And when the father died young, Hitler was only like 11. That was it. He was stuck to her side all the fucking time. He was babied all the time. Yeah. He was treated. And I think it was a similar situation where she had to bring up some of the stepkids as well, So they were,
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
In very, very similar circumstances. And they spent basically all day, every day together. And when Louis was older, when he was king, he would actually say that his love of culture and his love of the arts, it came from his mother's interest. Like she stoked that fire in him.
They didn't say how long she breastfed him for, no?
Oh, she wouldn't have been breastfed by him. So this is a story. This is the only story that I'm going to tell you about Louis XIV, right? Before proper story. So basically, he was not breastfed. He did have a wet nurse. I show you a portrait of her, kind of feeding him, after the show. It's actually quite funny. He's just sitting there with one boob out, and he's there all swaddled.
What age is he though? What age?
Oh no, no. I don't know what age he stopped, but if you just let me tell the story, it will tell a bit more about it. So this wet nurse that would have been his nanny as well, is alive for a long time into his reign. A long time into his reign. This man, I mean, she would wake him up every morning with a kiss, to the extent of this man is 50 years of age, lying in bed, and this is the first person that he sees. She opens up the curtains of the bed, she pulls back, she gives him a kiss on the cheek, and she goes out, and then his day with his attendants, they come in then, she goes out, and that's how his day starts.
But to argue a case here, back in those times, those women would nearly be closer to you than your mother, because your mother is kind of like a figurehead as well, and these people are taking care of you like a mother takes care of you. I agree
with you there, but Louis XIV could possibly be the only royal exception here. This is what I'm saying by uncommonly close to the time. He was not out of his mother's sight at all, ever. When he was, there was none of this he's the heir to the throne, he lives in his own love here, Oh yeah, absolutely. To the extent that when he's older, he doesn't. He's fine around men, but he prefers being around women because he loves women that can make him laugh, witty women. It's not even he is really a sexually charged king, but it's not just about sex in women. He likes witty women. He likes elegant women. He likes women that can basically be ornaments, not just ornaments, because he wanted them to be able to talk, but that looked pleasant around the court, that we're able to dress well.
I wouldn't say like that, but I would say when it comes to hanging out with people, I have more fun and find it easier to joke around women than I do men in a completely non-sexual way. I just find it's easier to make a girl laugh than it is to make a fella laugh. Or I find it easier to make a girl laugh than I do to make a fella laugh.
I'm the opposite.
And that I can just keep kind of talking to a girl and I have no problem. It just keep a conversation going, keep it funny, keep it light and all that stuff. Whereas with a fella, I might hit a brick wall and not know where to go with it, you know? And then I just prefer to hang out with girls in that sense because they just seem like easier to, because girls like to gossip. I think that's part of the reason.
Not all girls.
You know? So it's easier to have a bit of fun with what you're talking about.
That's true.
You know? So and then when I say something a little more controversial and a bit more over the top, a girl's reaction, whereas a fella's reaction might be, ew, we can't talk about that. A girl's reaction will be like, oh, you shouldn't be talking about that, and then go on. So it's more fun.
But yeah, so
I get it.
Yes.
I don't get the whole propping them up like little ornaments around the place. That's a little narcissistic.
No, I don't mean like ornaments. It was just like it was pleasant to look at. I mean, when he built Versailles was supposed to be like the center of like European culture. I mean, like this place was pristine. Not even beautiful people. I mean, you didn't have to just
Fashion Week in Milan kind of fucking
yeah. Like there was even a hierarchy in Versailles at the time that the lower kind of, not lower class, but like least favorite people would live at the ground floor of Versailles. And then as you got higher up in Versailles and like by floor, you kind of got
up for a promotion. You got to get on a weighing scale, do a bikini contest.
Exactly. But we're going to leave the rest of Louis the 14th till next episode. But just to end with Louis the 13th, that he made the will. He decreed that instead of Anne being the sole regent for Louis XIV, that there would be a regency council who would rule on the son's behalf, and Anne would be its head. But Anne was
similar to House of Dragons kind of thing, where you have to sit down when your man's after being burnt to a crisp and he's lying there. They have a crew that go in there and they talk about it and try and make up a decision. Whereas one is still on top. They have one person kind of technically in charge, but you're going to have to
regent.
But there's voting involved and there's decision. Yeah.
Exactly.
She doesn't have sole fucking call on what he does. She's got to.
Well, she wasn't supposed to.
She's got to politically work her way to getting what she wants.
That was the idea. But when Louis died, so he died on the 14th of May. And then on the 18th of May, Queen Anne had her husband's will annulled by the Parlement de Paris, which I said was the most important Parliament. And she became the sole regent.
How'd she manage that?
Sweet talk to Parliament, as in like this is.
Was she able to did she have to prove he was crazy or anything when he wrote it, or?
No, it was.
Or it was just like, here's a bribe.
Here's a bribe. I know these guys support me. Well, those guys don't support them. Yeah, they're as in like she would have had her own network as well. Like, also Cardinal Richelieu. He would have helped instigate things under Louis XIII. They would have been kind of back and forth there as well, so there would have been support for Cardinals.
Basically, she just knew how to play the political game and got what she wanted.
Exactly. She also had two of the husband's ministers exiled, so she got rid of them. She appointed people that she knew would support her as Minister of Foreign Affairs. That's why I'm going to ask a
question before, and I don't know, is it a spoiler for next week? If it's for next week, tell me it's for next week. If not, but was he right to be worried? Did she steer him in a direction that he would have been against? Did she kind of lead him on the right path? Was he right to be worried? There was
a series of civil wars called the Fronde, and I'll get into it more next season. But I think that he had a right to be worried about the direction that maybe the country could have potentially gone in, and also he had a right to be worried about the position that his young son was being put in, because stuff happened to that child that would terrify you. No, that shouldn't have happened to any child. Do you know that means
that doesn't sound like an endpoint cliffhanger? I don't know what does. Yes. But I enjoyed that. I learned a lot. You could see I did actually study a little bit. Look, I crammed a few bits in there to try and think. I mightn't have gotten it all in the right way, but you were able to lead me along there and teach me. And it's interesting. It's crazy, but it just baffles me how so much trouble could be caused over the idea of whether to worship a man in a funny hat or not.
You see, I think that just what you're saying about you find it interesting that this particular time period, it encompasses just one royal dynasty in France, but you get kind of like a splash of every kind of like interesting part of history. So you see the religious wars, we'll go into like really bloody conflicts. You get kind of like the soap opera parts of it. Like, like they were such a colourful family. Like, there's so much there. I mean, like Louis IV, I said that to you before. I mean, like throw a ring in there and it's basically like watching Attitude Era. Yeah, with the storylines.
Oh, and that'd be a nice tie-in there. We'll lead it into my first season of Wrestling with Time in 4 weeks' time.
Exciting.
Oh, yeah. But we got 3 more weeks of this to come.
And next week, I think it's I'm going to say this about the 40th episode as well, but next week, just to tell you what it's about, it's just Louis XIV. Well, not Louis XIV, but like France under Louis XIV, like the architecture, the ostentations.
So my homework this week is just the life and times of Louis XIV.
And Versailles.
Will I watch that Versailles show? Does it have anything to do with it?
If you can cram it. Oh, yeah. Well, that is just Louis XIV. It's a very good show, actually.
How long is it?
I think it got cancelled after 3 seasons, but it didn't get cancelled because it was shit. It is actually very good. It's worth the watch, and I'll be like kind of talking about tiny little things here and there. Watch?
Is there a movie? Actually, that's a good question. People who are interested in this and have a little, who are like me, who have very little information in this, but like thought what you were saying here is interesting enough. Is there any movies or TV shows? You're saying Versailles is a good one to watch if you want a bit of entertainment and a little bit of info. Like what do they call it? Edutainment.
So obviously what we said, Versailles is absolutely fantastic. Well, the first time that I watched it, I hadn't really discovered French history yet.
Yeah,
it was kind of
your British fucking history true and true, like all the royal stuff up to a point.
Up to a point, but I kind of like, it's funny because that point in kind of English history and this point of French history kind of crosses over.
It seems like it would go hand in hand for you, because the French kind of seem like they'd be very similar to the British in the way they deal with, so even more intense, probably a bit wilder and a bit more fun to listen to the French stuff. They don't seem as uptight.
There was
as
more
the
kind of
more Game of Thrones, kind of fucking backstabbing and fucking screwing and
well, there's like that in England as well, but we just hadn't maybe talked about it enough. Okay. But Versailles, I would 100% watch the TV show. The Man in the Iron Mask with Leonardo DiCaprio plays Louis XIV. It's not really historically accurate. I wouldn't go by a lot of how he is portrayed. You do see kind of like his sexual appetite in it. He likes to dance. He likes to put on shows himself. You see kind of that side of it.
You have an idea the background or the time period maybe, but not so much what was actually happening.
Exactly.
Any other movies?
Not at the moment. There's Versailles, the Dream of a King. It's a YouTube. I think it's 3-parter. That is worth it. You do see his whole kind of, he gets Versailles basically. It's like a bog. It's really swampy and marshy. So you go from that time period in his life to when he dies basically.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay, so that's some stuff to check out before we click on with it next week.
Exactly.
And we'll be back up next Monday exclusively on Patreon, where you get everything now outside the main show. The main show will be there ad-free if you pay. There is some free stuff that's going to be up here every now and again, and this is going to pop up here free in about a month's time, maybe 2 months' time. We haven't made up our mind yet, but you will eventually be listening to this for free if you're too fucking cheap to pay. Fucking cheap arse. Until then, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.